Charlene, welcome to the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by having you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm Charlene Fadirepo. Man, I do so many things in the Bitcoin space. I'm a Bitcoin activist, an educator. I run a company called Mango Digital Strategies, and we help businesses onboard into Bitcoin and embrace Bitcoin. I have a couple of books out. I'm one of the co-authors of Bitcoin and the American Dream, which is this amazing book that we wrote last year to help lawmakers understand Bitcoin. Also, am the author of Sade Satoshi's, and most importantly, I'm the founder and creator of the Bitcoin in Africa show, and that's a podcast where we are telling Africa's Bitcoin story.
Thank you, Charlene, for that introduction. I'm super excited to have you on the show. One of the first questions I usually ask people is one that I really want to know about, which is where did you source your Bitcoin knowledge, whether it was books, courses, or even people in the Bitcoin ecosystem that might have inspired you or helped you gain some knowledge about becoming a better Bitcoiner?
Yeah, so my Bitcoin journey, and I love this. So my Bitcoin journey has been it's been fast, but it's been wonderful, and it has been people led. I mean, I have to absolutely acknowledge that I started off on ClubHouse as a part of a very well known Bitcoin community called the Black Bitcoin Billionaires. And this was at a time where I had another business where I was actually coaching women to use financial advisors. So I'm on ClubHouse, talking to people about Bitcoin, learning about Bitcoin, but also getting a lot of questions from my clients. And I think there was a moment around the pandemic that it clicked for me. And I said, whoa, this thing is huge. I need to pivot and I need to kind of double down. And I think at that moment, I went down what you call the rabbit hole. I'm on ClubHouse 10 and 15 hours a day, learning from the community, all the communities there, but also teaching at the same time. I read my first Bitcoin book was actually the Little Bitcoin book that I love. And I always recommend that book to folks. But it was really kind of the Bitcoin community that helped me understand the practical part of Bitcoin. And then the other part is I'm Black American. I've been married for 11 years to a Nigerian. And so I walk in two worlds. So I walk in the United States and I'm always thinking about what's happening in Nigeria. And so when I kind of understood Bitcoin as an asset class, I immediately said, this is phenomenal for Africa. I've had a deep understanding of the inflation issues in Africa for a very long time. And so connecting those dots for me, it was very clear. So that journey for me was fast and definitely people led. And I thank the Bitcoin Twitter community. I thank the Black Bitcoin Billionaire community. Even there are a lot of women that helped me kind of understand how they were experiencing Bitcoin. Lots of people have contributed to my knowledge. And you know what? You never stop learning when it comes to Bitcoin.
Most definitely. I think that that's just such a beautiful way to kind of, you know, get into this asset, because I think a lot of people have very unique ways of learning about Bitcoin. And, I must agree as well. Clubhouse, Black Bitcoin Billionaires has been extremely instrumental in my orange pill journey. So Charlene, you talk about walking in two different worlds, and I think a lot of people can cast aspersions about Africa in conjunction with Bitcoin. And I know that you recently visited Ghana for the Africa Bitcoin conference, and as of right now, no sub-Saharan countries in Africa have 100% power or 100% electricity. And the countries that do are, I believe, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. So how can, Bitcoin mining, something that's super instrumental for renewable energy and just allowing some of these countries to actually use Bitcoin to make their energy more efficient, their grid more efficient, how do you think Bitcoin mining can fix some of these issues in Africa?
So absolutely. So Bitcoin mining is such a key part of Africa's Bitcoin story for two reasons. One, Bitcoin mining is a really easy way for everyday Africans to generate income for themselves. On my show, we interviewed so many incredible small town Bitcoin mining operations, one or two S9s, and they were actually generating more money than they were generating in a prior job. So that's one. But more importantly, what you're seeing in countries like Kenya, and maybe even South Africa, is you're seeing, Africa has the benefit of large bodies of water, and water means thermoelectric power. When we were in Ghana, we actually I went to the Volta region, where you see the largest man-made reservoir in the world. And that Volta region has a dam, Adukumbo Dam. That one dam powers the entire country. That's the opportunity that we have here when it comes to African countries. And, we have not explored harnessing hydropower for Bitcoin mining yet. In Africa, it's a clean slate. And one of the things I thought about when I was in Ghana, I said, the problems that you see in Africa, they've been solved in other countries. They have. Power, 100% uninterruptible power, has been solved in the United States. We can fix it in Africa with the right tools in place, with the right folks advocating for it. And most importantly, we can fix it in this lifetime. I think that's why Bitcoin is so powerful. It allows us to fix the gaps that have unfortunately been left by authoritarian governments, greed, corruption, and folks that didn't have the interest of the entire country in mind.
Most definitely. And, Ghana has a special place in my heart because that's the birthplace of where my father was from. And I agree with you that, it's a big infrastructure issue in the country, and not only just in Ghana, but in most sub-Saharan places in Africa. A lot of people are running off of generators. They have a lot of blackouts. They have a lot of water quality issues, and just things that shouldn't happen with all the abundance of natural resources that the continent has. So I definitely think that your work, your podcast, what you do on the continent is instrumental in helping people on the ground actually learn about Bitcoin and utilize it as kind of a tool or a fulcrum for people to better their lives in the countries that are affected mostly by poverty and a lack of store value and a lack of sovereignty. So I thank you, Charlene, for that. And my next question is kind of getting into something I really wanted to ask you, which is, your role as, a woman in the space, a woman in the Bitcoin ecosystem, which we don't see a lot of. And I know that we definitely need more people like you in the ecosystem. So, what is your strategy for, breaking gender bias in the industry, especially when you're dealing with, ecosystem or an industry that's not really that welcoming to women?
And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And let me tell you a story. So I guess last year in Miami was my very first Bitcoin Miami conference. And that was, it was really interesting. And when I was there, I was at the Fold party. It was this huge party. It was in a hotel. And so many women came up to me and said, "I'm so happy to see you in this space. You have no idea what it means when you're on Twitter. You have no idea what it means when I see you on ClubHouse." And these women were all ages, all races, all backgrounds from multiple countries. And at that moment, I said to myself, oh my goodness, you don't really you never know who is watching, and you never know who you're inspiring. And so I know what it feels like to be othered. I know what it feels like to be the only Black person in a space. I definitely know what it feels like to be the only woman in the space. And many times it doesn't feel good. And so I think that in addition to some of the work that I do, I'm very deeply aware of my role as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black American woman married to a Nigerian. And I actually think that is a superpower that allows me to understand how to reach the world, right? Bitcoin is a world currency. So we need to have a world conversation about Bitcoin. I always say you need to find your place in the Bitcoin space. And I absolutely mean that when I'm talking to women. There are going to be some spaces that are not welcoming. Okay. Don't go there. You know what I mean? You can bang your head against the wall, or you can find spaces that are more welcoming. And we can definitely try to, fix people's behaviors and try to, make people act right. But I just say, honestly, create your own space. you didn't ask this, but I think it's important to say, the first level of Bitcoin is understand. The next level is, what are you going to do? Like, after you get it, like, you need to know how, you need to know that, like, but you need to know what to do next, right? And so, are you going to teach? Are you going to organize a business? Are you going to help other people? Are you going to create hopefully generational wealth for yourself and your community? It's not enough to just read a book. Hopefully you're going to tell your family, but beyond that, you need to figure out what you're going to do. And once you figure out what you're going to do, if you have chosen to be public, right? Because it's a conscious choice that comes with pluses and minuses. What does that mean? What does that mean to be public with your positioning on Bitcoin? And the last thing I'll just say, recognize it's a huge responsibility. If you have a platform of one person or 10,000 people, it's a huge responsibility. And you have to be careful about everything you say, because people are making decisions based on the information that you share. And for me, I take this idea of trust very seriously. I came from the banking industry, so that the public trust is important. There is no room for error. And I just think that, for me, I want to see more women in the space. And I think that me just kind of being here is important. Sometimes showing up is the highest form of resistance. And I try to show up, as my best self every day.
Yes, and you show up and show out, and I'm super proud of you. And you talked about what are you going to do in the industry as far as educating or teaching or giving back. And I know that you've written some books on Bitcoin. I bought your book for my daughter, and I just think that is very instrumental for young women, especially women of color, to see a reflection of themselves in this industry, because that kind of inspires. Like when Nipsey Hussle always says, the highest human act is to inspire. And I think that a lot of women are watching you, even if they don't give you your kudos publicly. I think that they watch you and they kind of learn from you. And I do think that it's important that we are transparent about what we're actually teaching or giving back to the community, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, because this asset is so new. And that kind of leads to my next question, which is something that I'm really proud of you about, which is your podcast, which I tune in and listen to a lot, because I find it very instrumental. Outside of maybe Satoshi's journal, you're really boots on the ground, giving the information of what's going on in Nigeria. So my question to you, Charlene, is do you believe staying connected to the youth in Nigeria is bringing Africa closer to a Bitcoin standard?
I think so. And I absolutely, I think so. And I think that Nigeria has a Bitcoin story. Kenya has a Bitcoin story. Ghana has a Bitcoin story. I think when I went to the Africa Bitcoin conference, I was proud of Farida Nabarima and her entire team. I have to say that it was an all African team that organized the first African Bitcoin conference. That was a historic event. It was phenomenal. But I was just thinking, like, this is Africa's moment to shine. And every country in Africa is beautiful and remarkably different and has so many wonderful things to offer. And this is their opportunity to leapfrog the problems of the past to move toward the future. And so I would like to think that the conversations that we have on the Bitcoin in Africa show is closing some of those gaps in knowledge and encouraging people to innovate. Our goal is to amplify. I see myself, there's a really famous Black American writer named James Baldwin, who I love. And his job was to just be a witness. His focus was to be a witness of the civil rights movement, because he wanted to shine a light on the people that were doing the work. And I see my role with the Bitcoin in Africa show very similarly. So we focus on the leaders. We focus on the CEOs that are running Bitcoin companies. We focus on the developers that are doing GitHub pulls on the Bitcoin blockchain. We focus on media influencers, the folks that are actually building community and driving change. Because sometimes they don't get their flowers. They don't get their shine. I think the work for me is so inspiring. It inspires me that in spite of every difficult circumstance, many of these CEOs are wildly successful despite, and it's wonderful. And they deserve to get just as much media as Jeff Bezos, right? Because they are building and grinding in the most difficult circumstances, and achieving success. And so that's the goal of the show. We have been very fortunate. I'm so grateful to all the folks that say yes to us. I am looking forward to covering more African leaders, and we're going to try to cover the entire continent. 1.4 billion people need to know. They need to know this. Like, this is the one piece of information that will change their lives. Africa needs Bitcoin, and Bitcoin needs Africa. Like, Obi Nwosu, who's the founder of Fedi, he had this incredibly inspiring speech during the African Bitcoin conference, and he said Africa will lead the way. He is right. He is right. And he talked about, I had a chance to interview him for the show, and he said, Charlene, it's that Bitcoin, like Africa only needs Bitcoin, and Bitcoin only needs Africa, right? These two things are the most important pieces of the puzzle for success. And he's right. And I think all of us have a role in making sure that happens in this lifetime. We don't have to wait 20 years. This can happen in 5 years. If you think about how fast everything has happened in the crypto market. I mean, last year was a tough year, but the things are happening at the speed of lightning. And so, I just think that we all need to get on board and give Africa the resources that it needs to be successful. From folks of us from the West, stay out of the way. Let Africa solve Africa's own problems. That's really important, really important. In the West, we have a tendency to come and impose our perspectives and views on problems without doing the work to deeply understand the root causes. And I think that's why the African Bitcoin Conference, being launched, developed, and executed by an all-African team, that is critically important. And because what they did, they built a really solid foundation for the Bitcoin Africa community. That's what we needed. Now everybody kind of has that placeholder, and we can connect and feed and build in our own individual ways. For the folks from the West, but it should be led by Africans. And I think that's so important. And it's important, but we need to say it and we need to do it.
I agree with that. I couldn't agree anymore. And, I think that, when they talk about Bitcoin, when you think about countries that ban Bitcoin, right, the hash rate tends to move to places that actually need it the most, right? And I think that Africa needs Bitcoin the most, and all of the talent, all of the skill sets are starting to navigate towards the continent. And you're going to see the benefits of that very quickly and very soon, because we have some of the most talented, intelligent people working on Bitcoin in Africa. And I think that your show, your podcast really highlights that. And I think that that's super important, because when people look at this asset, they look at Bitcoin, they just assume that this is something coming out of Silicon Valley, and they don't think about Africa in that context of, or a place that is kickstarting innovation. And that's I think that your podcast is something that I know for myself, living in the West, but having family in Africa, I can always connect the bridges there when I listen to your show, because, it's just utterly important. And I just can't give you your flowers any more than that. But Charlene, you do great things in the space. And there's also something that I really wanted to talk about, which is your business acumen. You have your own, consulting company that you talk about Bitcoin, and you actually help clients onboard into this asset when they're curious. And my question to you, and this is the last question, is, what is your call to action for people or clients that are interested in Bitcoin?
My call to action is that Bitcoin is the future of money. So get on board or get left behind. I tell my clients this every day, and what's so interesting is, I've targeted financial services companies, but that conversation is actually for any business. If you're building any business in this year, you need to figure out how Bitcoin can help you meet your growth goals. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your investors, you owe it to your employees. because there will be a time where it'll be too late. And this is a wonderful time for any business leader, for any futurist, if you will, to start thinking about like the next 5 to 10 years. What can I do to build that in business, to build that moat, to make myself ultra competitive, to make sure I can meet the goals that I have set for my business. And I think that Bitcoin can be that rocket ship definitely for a bank, but certainly for other businesses to ensure that they are competitive in the global economy.
Most definitely. I love that answer. Thank you, Charlene, for that. And this conversation has been great. It's been very instrumental. I hope it inspires people. I hope people can tune into this episode and really learn about you and what you do and all that you do in the Bitcoin ecosystem. But before we leave, can you give people your social media handles and any future endeavors that you might want to talk about on the show?
Indeed. So you can reach me on Twitter at Char Fadirepo. So really active on Twitter. You can, our show, I just launched a brand new website that we're super excited about, and it is the bitcoininafricashow.com. So if you check out our website, you will see all of our past episodes. We have some additional episodes that we need to upload. And then we have some very cool episodes that we'll be dropping in the next few weeks, where we had a chance to sit down with Obi Mosu, the founder of Fedi. Had a chance to talk to my friend Ray Youssef from Paxful again. Just some really great conversations, because again, we need to tell this story. Africa is rising, and I'm just excited to be a part of this incredible movement to change the world. And I hope you all will come with us, because there's space for everybody. And thank you again, Daldu, for this time to be on the show.
Thank you, Charlene. Once again, thank you for taking time to be on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.